I think the most frequent question I'm asked one-on-one, including in airports as late as yesterday, is what are you going to do about the transfer portal? There's continuing evaluation by many about the role of outside financing in college sports, often referred to quickly as private equity. There's a bit of sudden expertism, as I call it, around us, where somebody is certain to have the next great idea. And as I've shared a few times, there's no easy button for dealing with the complexities that we face. And we also have to work together effectively as conference leaders. Now, I'm not going to walk through and provide you a paragraph or two on each of those items. I know you're grateful for that reality. But let me start with the working relationship among conference commissioners, because there's commentary on that from the outside that doesn't see the inside. I think in Division I, we all have a responsibility to work with commissioners from all 32 all-sports conferences. There's going to be disagreements. There's vast differences in competitive and economic realities and attendance realities around those programs. But we do spend a great deal of time in dialogue. We have a second segment of commissioners, those in the bowl subdivision that populate the College Football Playoff Management Committee. You'll hear me in a moment talk about our June meetings that I thought were healthy discussions. Whether we make a decision that's predicted to be made or not is really inconsequential from a relational standpoint. What's important is working through the hard issues together. And then you have the four labeled autonomy conferences, some of you would call Power Four. That group receives the greatest level of attention. One of the encouragements for my presidents during our time in Destin is that we should gather the four commissioners and two presidents from each of those four conferences to talk about our future, as we may have a different role in the NCAA. We face different issues at the state or federal level. And in fact, all that's happening around higher ed, those are important dialogues, and I think an indication of the recognition that we all must work together. We also announced a year and a half ago a relationship, an advisory council with the Big Ten. We've had 2 in-person meetings of our athletics directors and a number of video conferences involving the full advisory council and then subgroups, sometimes of presidents and chancellors and some of athletics directors. We had to slow down a little bit because we've had some key personnel changes among members of that advisory council, but I can assure you we will be back in conversation as we move forward. As it relates to the settlement, I thought it appropriate to use a bit of a metaphor for running a marathon. So I have run and finished 41 marathons in my lifetime. It's been a while, but I do remember the importance of getting off to the right kind of start. That doesn't mean you feel great in the first 2 miles, nor does it mean, transitioning that metaphor, that everything works perfectly in the first 2 weeks of settlement implementation. There have been plenty of naysayers in the last 14 days, but the settlement went into effect July 1st, and we're here July 14th while working through historic and transformational change. We're in the middle of change, and in the middle of anything significant, it will get messy. That doesn't mean you leave. In a marathon, it doesn't mean you step off the course, because for myself, as poorly as I may have felt sometimes after 2 or 3 miles, I recall that those moments might actually produce the best efforts. The burden of making a new system work is certainly on commissioners and conference offices, but the responsibility is shared with our campuses and our campus leaders. And that's recognized in this league. We still have to work through the implementation, but the burden is shared by presidents and chancellors, athletics directors and coaches. It's also shared by those around our programs. I've asked repeatedly in conference meetings, if we don't want any limits or any structure, just let me know. Then the phone stops ringing. But over and over again in meeting rooms, the desire has been for a structure. And so we are implementing a structure even with some bumps in the road. We need to commit to that structure. We need to be willing to make that structure work. We also know that we are continuing to work with members of Congress. And we welcome that interest and the ongoing dialogue in Washington to support our congressional engagement. This isn't about preserving the status quo. This is about providing clarity and the opportunity to build a future with opportunities and healthy support. And on that last note, we continue to be proud about how we have adapted as a league, and I would offer as a group into Division I to better support young people in their endeavors. Pretty interesting to listen to the Major League Baseball draft and hear the number of college athletes, for example, taken by MLB. Major League Baseball understands the support, the education, the emotional development, the medical care, the nutritional education, the financial education, the coaching, and the competition provide a better prepared athlete for their teams. Those are our realities, not just for those taken in a professional draft, but throughout our programs. And so as we think about our work with Congress, we want a future where we have national standards, where we're able to play national championships on an equitable basis and support healthy economic opportunities for student athletes. Last week, we saw the bipartisan introduction of the SCORE Act in the House of Representatives. That's an important moment. I view what's happening in college athletics as a nonpartisan issue, but using the typical nomenclature to have members from both of our major political parties willing to step out and introduce the SCORE Act is a positive step. Now, I remember Schoolhouse Rock, right? I'm just a bill. Yeah, I'm only a bill, and I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. So congratulations, we have a bill on Capitol Hill that is sitting and requires a great deal of more work. But I think the bipartisan effort represents an indication that college athletics, just as it does in football stadiums every Saturday, can bring people together for conversation. And we hope the restoration of national standards for college athletics. On the topic of eligibility, for decades, we became accustomed to college athletics being focused on an undergraduate degree-seeking experience. Now, through a combination of institutionally requested and NCAA-granted waivers, followed by lawsuits related to transfer eligibility, the number of seasons of eligibility, and the length of time, commonly referred to as the 5-year clock for that eligibility period from enrollment to completing competition, people are remaining as college athletes longer, probably as evidence that it's a good experience, and the entry points as a result for high school athletes are being reduced. My guess is you have to return to the early 1900s. Literally, if you go to the first quarter century and look at some of the practices around college sports, you start to see the same things that we are seeing today. An older group of student athletes, constant movement without a lot of oversight, and questions about whether there are real academic standards that apply. As the world changes across college sports, we have to hold on to some values that are at the center of what we do on our academic campuses. We need to invite young people into higher education with the goal of moving them from adolescence to adulthood. We need to require unapologetically a person to make meaningful progress towards a degree. And if they don't make that meaningful progress, then simply understand they won't be able to participate in the athletics experience. And we have to make sure there's an entry point for the next generation of leaders and athletes who aspire to participate in college athletics following their high school experience. As I mentioned, common standards and national standards before, there is a need to return to a common standard for athletics participation. It's embedded in the undergraduate educational experience that helps foster a college-going culture to the next generation who seeks to enroll and participate in college athletics, all while requiring meaningful academic progress leading towards a degree, not subject to the whim of requested or granted waivers, and not resulting in legal decisions that will vary from courtroom to courtroom. Transitioning from eligibility to the NCAA tournament expansion in basketball, in general, we are supportive of expanding both the men's and the women's basketball tournaments. Nothing in college basketball is static, so tournament expansion is certainly worth exploring. As last season showed, the Southeastern Conference is going to be fine whether the bracket expands or not. We had a record 14 teams selected to participate in the NCAA men's basketball tournament after what is, without question, a historically successful regular season. We had 10 teams tying our own record selected to participate in the NCAA women's basketball tournament. We're going to be fine, but we think there are enough quality teams to make this growth appropriate. Now, to be clear, we support expansion, but you just don't jump into it. So if there are reasons from a broadcast point, financial point, logistics point, or competitive realities that don't support expansion, then again, we're going to be fine. But in general, I think this is the right direction to at least explore. Speaking of expansion, I felt the first year of the 12-year college football playoff was a success. That doesn't mean everything was perfect, and there are certainly opportunities to improve. But what happened through the 12-team college football playoff is we brought teams into the conversation at a time when they would have been talking about their bowl game. We brought teams into the national championship conversation so the young people on those teams had that national championship competition access point. I think the recent modifications by the college football playoff to adjust the seeding to be consistent with the selection committee's rankings is entirely appropriate given the adjustments in conference membership that have happened nationally since the 12-team concept was first introduced in June of 2021. Those of you with us in Destin will remember a lot of speculation going into that meeting, but what came out was we think growth beyond 12 can be positive and should be pursued. There's also a belief that the process for selecting teams to participate in the college football playoff can be updated and improved itself. That's where my earlier reference to our discussion at the June management committee meeting of the college football playoff was encouraging, because we talked about selection committee protocol. We talked about the analysis of strength of schedule and a possible new metric under the label of strength of record. Each of those is consistent with our observations out of our spring meetings. Much more work is needed and more needs to be understood. We have to see the homework, if you will, but the discussion and the direction of the discussion is viewed positively from our perspective, with the need for timely decision making, which then lets me jump into the football schedule to be used in the Southeastern Conference in the future. So as you write and comment about our approach to our football schedule, let me give you a few just quick hits that you are free to use. No intellectual property claim here. It is absolutely, fully, 100% correct that in the SEC we play 8 conference games while some others play 9 conference games. Never been a secret. Second, it's also correct that last season all 16 members of the Southeastern Conference played at least 9 games against what you would label power opponents. We had several that played 10 of their 12 games against power opponents. Some conferences have that, some don't. The same will be true this year. And we have Washington State, and we're obviously transitioning in the Pac-12 that's included in that group. And we again have several of our football teams that have 10 of those power games embedded within their schedule. I don't believe there's anyone looking to swap their conference schedule and its opponents with the opponents played by Southeastern Conference teams in our conference schedule, be it 8 or 9.